As the rightful heir to the fortune, Ethan Hawthorne was threatening to hurl himself off the yacht instead of returning to our prestigious family. My four sisters were right on the verge of pleading with him to stop being so reckless. Suddenly, every single thought racing through my mind started leaking directly into their brains. There is no point in wasting your breath trying to talk him down because Ethan has absolutely no intention of jumping. He is just putting on a massive show, so everyone on this boat knows he is the only legitimate Hawthorne heir. The second I step toward him, he's going to grab me and drag me straight into the ocean with him. He wants to test the sisters and see if they would choose to save me or him. I have caused so much trouble over the last few years that I have completely exhausted their patience. They are so done with me that there is no way they would ever reach out a hand to save my life. Besides, I am not even their actual brother. The script is already written. Ethan gets rescued while I sink to the bottom of the ocean and drown. It is the perfect way to fulfill my destiny as the villainous sidekick who exists only to die, letting his scheme succeed so I can finally go back to the real world. All five women shuddered at the exact same moment and whipped their heads around to stare at me. I was just standing there casually enjoying the show, but their eyes were bugging out and their faces were frozen in total shock. I was so lost in my own head that I started walking toward Ethan without even realizing they were watching me. One step, then two. Just as I was about to reach him, a hand shot out and clamped down firmly around my wrist. "Morrison, it is dangerous. Get back here right now." I turned around to see my oldest sister, Sarah. Man, it is such a shame that this beautiful and charming woman is destined to die at Ethan's hands later. She will be left to rot in some alleyway in a truly horrific way. Her body will be left there until it starts to rot before anyone even finds her. Sarah visibly stiffened the moment that thought crossed my mind. "Sarah, you have to believe me. Ethan's DNA test is a total forgery. He is not your real brother. I am. Do not listen to a word he says." I screamed at the top of my lungs, ripping my arm out of her grasp. I made another desperate lunging move toward Ethan. "Ethan, I know you have always been jealous of me, but using the fact that I am not a biological Hawthorne as a weapon is low. You are a complete scumbag. Go to hell." I broke away from Sarah without a second thought, secretly cheering inside, because I was only one step away from freedom. Ethan looked absolutely furious, so I knew if I got close enough, he would seize the opportunity to drag me over the side with him. Finally, I could drown and clock out of this nightmare forever. Unfortunately, that rush of excitement only lasted for a few seconds. The other four sisters swarmed me instantly, each grabbing a different limb and pinning me to the deck. "Morrison, have you completely lost your mind? You will actually die if you fall into that water. Do you understand that? Morrison, what the hell is wrong with you?" They were all glaring at me like a pack of wolves ready to rip me to shreds. I swallowed hard as the system's mechanical voice echoed in my head. "Morrison, you have 10 seconds remaining until your scheduled time of death. If you fail to fall into the ocean within this window, you will be trapped here forever." That robotic voice sent me into a total panic. I started screaming at them at the top of my lungs, asking if they even cared what happened to me since they were supposed to be my sisters. There is no way you are actually related to Ethan. I refuse to believe it. This whole thing is just an elaborate trap he set up. I hate him, and everything about him makes me sick. At the same time, I was internally begging them to just let me go. Ethan is the one you should care about because he's your actual brother. I'm nothing more than a disposable pawn who is literally destined to die right now. Let me go. I have to do this. I channeled every ounce of strength I had left and managed to wrench myself away from their grip. I charged at Ethan with everything I had. He didn't even have time to react before I slammed into him at full speed. We both crashed against the railing and flipped over into the dark water. The moment we hit the surface, the freezing ocean rushed into my ears and nose. My lungs felt like they were going to explode, and my head was throbbing with a sharp, agonizing pain. This was 100 times worse than I had ever imagined. Damn it, I didn't realize drowning was such a miserable way to go. Sarah was the first one to dive in, followed immediately by Sophia and Isabella. They were jumping into the water one after another like a rescue relay. Ethan felt a surge of relief, thinking that they actually cared about him after all. But then a voice cut through the chaos, screaming that Morrison was sinking. In an instant, the figures that were swimming toward Ethan made a sharp turn and changed direction. They all veered off course simultaneously, diving deeper into the dark depths of the ocean. Ethan was completely stunned because he was their biological brother. He couldn't understand why they would abandon him to save an outsider. Inside my mind, the system began the final countdown for my departure from this world. 5, 4, 3. I decided to just let go and allowed my body to drift toward the bottom of the sea. Suddenly, a pair of strong arms wrapped around my waist, and a massive force yanked me back toward the surface. The world was spinning when I finally felt someone frantically and violently performing CPR on my chest. Damn it, Morrison! If you dare to die on me, I will literally tear you limb from limb. Who the hell is being so aggressive while I'm trying to die? Even at death's door, someone is planning to butcher me. I broke into a fit of violent coughing, hacking up all the seawater that had filled my lungs. As soon as I opened my eyes, a wave of pure joy hit me as I thought I was home. Grandpa, I am finally back. Before I could finish the sentence, 5 faces appeared directly above me, staring down in a perfect row. I shut my mouth instantly and let my eyes wander around guiltily. Wasn't I supposed to be dead by now? Sophia let out a cold snort with water still dripping from her hair as she told me I wasn't going to die. The moment I heard that, I scrambled to my feet and prepared to throw myself back into the ocean. Isabella grabbed me from behind and locked her arms around me in a bear hug, dragging me away from the edge of the deck. I started thrashing around wildly, screaming for her to let go because I just wanted to go home. That is exactly what I am doing. I am taking you back to the house. No, that is not what I mean. I have to die right now, or I will miss my window. I was so desperate to leave that I threw a sharp elbow directly into Isabella's shoulder. I hit her hard enough to make her gasp in pain, giving me just enough time to break free and sprint toward the railing again. I only made it a few steps before I slammed right into Ethan, who was just trying to climb back onto the boat with a life buoy. The impact sent him flying right back into the water. I just stood there completely bewildered, wondering what the hell was actually happening. The main character was back in the water, and nobody was moving to save him. I grabbed my 4th sister, Eva, who was just standing there in a daze, and tossed her over the side like a sack of potatoes. Don't just stand there, go save him. Eva looked incredibly annoyed, but she gritted her teeth and dove in anyway, dragging Ethan back to the surface for the second time. I finally let out a sigh of relief. Okay, the hero is safe, so now it is finally my turn to die. With that thought in mind, I vaulted over the railing and threw myself into the air. Before they could even blink, I had disappeared over the side. However, the moment I left the deck, some invisible force slammed me right back onto the yacht. My head hit the deck with a sickening thud. Everything went dark instantly, and I lost consciousness. While I was out, I had a dream about my parents whom I had not seen in forever. My whole family was sitting around the dinner table together, making holiday treats for Christmas. Grandpa was there too, secretly sliding me a greeting card with some cash tucked inside, just like he always did. We spent the whole time talking and laughing together. The entire house felt warm and cozy, just like the perfect days we used to have. But before long, dark clouds gathered outside, and a sudden crack of thunder tore through the air. The peaceful scene turned cold and bitter in an instant. My mother, father, and grandfather all began to vanish right before my eyes. I screamed for them as I bolted upright in bed, gasping for air as if I had just been underwater. The furniture in the room looked strangely familiar. It was decorated with an almost gaudy level of luxury, with gold accents that were practically blinding. This was not my bedroom from back home. It was my suite in the Hawthorne estate. You're not dead. A cold voice shattered the silence of the room. I looked toward the bedside and saw my 2nd sister, Sophia, sitting there. I flew in the best medical team in New York to keep you alive. The only reason you're breathing right now is because they literally dragged you back from the brink of death. I turned my head and saw her perched on the sofa with a laptop balanced on her knees. Her fingers were flying across the keyboard with clinical precision. I tried to force a weak, dry smile. Sophia, since I am clearly still here, has the part where Ethan officially joins the family happened yet? Wait a second. Why was I still obsessing over the plot of the book? The real issue was that I had failed to die, which meant I was stuck here and couldn't go home. I demanded the system show itself. After what felt like an eternity, that familiar robotic voice finally echoed in my head. Morrison, I am deeply sorry, but your window for returning to your world has officially closed. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Are you telling me I'm trapped here? I've been busting my ass in this world for you, fixing every single plot hole you threw at me. Now you're telling me I can't go back to the real world? Are you freaking kidding me right now? Morrison, it is not entirely impossible for you to return. The system's voice was much quieter this time, sounding almost hesitant as it spoke. Because you are still alive, the narrative has been severely disrupted. The protagonist's family arc cannot move forward as intended, and the world is drifting further away from its original script. Just get to the point. Fine, if that is the case. I will just go kill myself right now. I didn't even wait for the system to finish before I threw off the covers and lunged out of bed. I ran to the window and leaned halfway out, ready to take the plunge. Morrison, wait. If you help the hero and heroine complete their story arcs, you will still have a chance to go home. You do not have to die to make this work. Before the system even finished the sentence, Sophia had tossed her laptop aside. She sprinted across the room and yanked me back from the ledge, slamming me onto the mattress. Morrison, who the hell gave you permission to die? Sophia pinned me down against the mattress with her entire body weight. Morrison, I don't care what your reasons were for trying to kill yourself. If you ever try something like this again, I will personally make sure you regret it. You want to die? Not without my permission, you don't. I was about to kick her off me, but her little speech actually made me freeze in confusion. What was wrong with Sophia? Why was she suddenly sounding like some kind of overbearing female lead in a romance novel? It was so cheesy and ridiculous, and more importantly, this position was extremely awkward. She was supposed to be my sister. Sophia glanced down at the way she was pinning me, and her ears turned bright red instantly. She was just about to get up when the door suddenly flew open. Wait, so this Ethan guy is Mia. My youngest sister, Mia, burst into the room and completely froze when she saw Sophia pinning me down. A second later, she moved like a blur, kicking Sophia right off the bed and onto the floor. Are you insane, Mia? Sophia screamed from the floor. Mia didn't even acknowledge her as she threw herself toward my bedside, looking at me with pure concern. Morrison, are you okay? I shook my head and told her I was fine. Mia had these bright, sparkling eyes that made her look as innocent as a kitten. She seemed so sweet and adorable, and if I didn't know the actual plot of this book, I would have been totally fooled. This girl was a literal wolf in sheep's clothing. To the rest of the world, she was a bubbly little angel, but her actual combat skills were off the charts. Despite her age, she was already the ruthless head of the Hawthorne family's secret operations with plenty of blood on her hands. Even a hard-as-nails character like her was destined to be framed by the heroine, Sarah, and killed in a terrorist attack. Ethan would even break up with Sarah over it, triggering a whole arc of tragic romance. Poor Mia was nothing more than a sacrificial lamb for the main couple's tragic love story. Thinking about that made me look at her with a lot more genuine pity than usual. Her expression started to darken, and she was just about to say something when Sophia, who was still clutching her side in pain, cut her off. What was that about Ethan when you burst in here? Sophia asked. Mia swallowed whatever she had been about to say and turned to Sophia. She turned to Sophia and said, Ethan ran away from home. The moment I heard that, my eyes practically lit up. Was the main plot finally getting underway? According to the original script, Ethan is supposed to save the heroine, Sarah, while he is on the run. Even though Sarah is the female lead, her personality is completely warped. She is so obsessed with revenge that she has basically lost her mind, focusing only on her goals and ignoring any collateral damage. She eventually ruins Ethan's family and destroys him both mentally and physically. And yet, he stays completely devoted to her, and the two of them actually get a happy ending. I was honestly curious to see what she looked like to make Ethan such a mindless simp. I quickly tried to usher them out, telling Sophia and Mia to go find Ethan and stop worrying about me. They both gave me a long, suspicious look before finally heading out of the room. They walked out one after the other. Sophia, I think I just heard not now. Let's just wait and see what he is up at first. Mia kept her mouth shut and didn't push it. I got myself together and snuck out of the mansion, totally unaware that Sophia and Mia were tailing me in the shadows. Based on the timeline, Sarah should be getting hunted down right about now. A dagger was supposed to fly toward her chest at any second, and that is when Ethan would make his heroic entrance. He would take the hit for her, effectively kickstarting their toxic romance. The scene was set in an alley in the Lower East Side, so I hopped in a cab and headed straight there. As soon as I stepped out of the car, the sky opened up and it started pouring. I immediately popped open the umbrella I had brought along. Luckily, I knew ahead of time that their first encounter happened during a massive rainstorm. Sophia and Mia, who were right behind me, didn't have umbrellas and got soaked to the bone instantly. The storm meant the heroine was about to be ambushed at any moment. Ethan was supposed to wander by and save her, beginning their endless cycle of drama. Since this was such a classic trope, I needed to find a good vantage point to watch the live-action version. "Hey, you there, kid, hold it right there," a gruff voice roared from behind me. A split second later, someone slammed into me and knocked my umbrella right out of my hand. The guy chasing me stepped right on the umbrella, crushing it into a twisted mess of metal and fabric. That was a $10,000 limited edition piece I had snatched from Sarah's car. I couldn't believe these thugs just trashed a luxury item like that. The rain soaked me to the skin instantly, making me shiver in the cold. I looked toward the commotion and saw a young woman sprinting for her life. She ducked into a side alley, and I froze for a second. Was that her? Was that the legendary, twisted heroine herself, Sarah? This was the woman who treated the main character like a pawn in her sick psychological games. I hurried after her and peered around the corner of the alley to catch the show. Well, look at you. You sure can run. The alley was a dead end, and Sarah was already backed into a corner. About a dozen guys were closing in on her, pulling out clubs and knives. According to the plot, these were loan sharks. She had borrowed $100,000 from them to pay for her father's medical bills, but the interest had ballooned that debt into $1 million. Anyone would lose their mind if they were hit with $1 million debt at 19. In the end, Sarah didn't become this way for no reason. Even the most twisted people usually have some kind of tragic backstory. If she hadn't ended up getting so many people killed later on, I might have actually felt sorry for her. Sarah suddenly heard something and frowned, shifting her gaze toward the entrance of the alley. She spotted my head poking around the corner almost immediately. Oh crap, was she actually looking right at me? I thought I was being stealthy, but apparently I was exposed. I ducked back behind the wall instantly, but in that split second, I caught a glimpse of Ethan nearby. He was busy helping an old man pack up a fruit stand in the pouring rain. He was bent over, picking up oranges one by one and putting them back into a crate. "Ethan, what the hell are you doing? Your literal soulmate is about to get murdered around the corner, and you're playing Good Samaritan with a pile of fruit? This is not the time to be the wholesome boy next door. Stick to the script, you idiot." Of course, Ethan couldn't hear me screaming at him in my head. He stayed focused on helping the old man, and eventually even pushed the cart away himself. I watched helplessly as his figure faded into the heavy rain, getting further and further away. "Hey, Ethan, get your ass back here." He was way out of earshot, though. That was when the system's voice piped up timidly in my mind. "Morrison, if the narrative fails to progress as planned, your return to the real world will be permanently canceled." I froze for a second, then gritted my teeth in frustration. I pulled a face mask out of my pocket and covered my nose and mouth, leaving only my eyes visible. "Everyone back off!" I roared as I sprinted into the alley. At that exact moment, a dagger whistled through the air, aimed straight for Sarah's chest. I muttered a curse under my breath and hit a burst of speed, reaching her in just a few strides. I threw a spinning hook kick, knocking the dagger out of the air with a loud metallic clang. The sharp blade buried itself deep into the brick wall. If that had hit Sarah, she would have been dead or at least crippled for life. "What the hell are you?" one of the thugs stammered, clearly spooked by my outfit and my speed. "I am your worst nightmare," I replied. "You think you can just assault people while I am standing here? Do you think the law is just a suggestion?" The leader let out a cold laugh and tried to maintain his bravado, shouting for his crew to get me. A mob of them came screaming out of the shadows, lunging toward me all at once. Mia was about to step in and help, but Sophia held her back. "Morrison has always been freakishly strong for his size. He doesn't need your help with these bottom feeders." Sophia was right. I was actually dangerously powerful in this world. This was the only cheat code the system gave me when I entered this world. I remember thinking it was a pretty useless ability back then. I'd looked down on it first, but I quickly realized just how much this strength was worth. As the thugs charged forward, Sarah's expression went cold. She was clearly planning to shove me forward to use me as a human shield, but I beat her to the punch by lunging into the fray. I started throwing wild left hooks and right crosses. My form was terrible. I looked like a complete amateur, but every single punch I landed carried enough force to shatter bone. Within a few seconds, I had leveled the entire group. They were all writhing on the ground, clutching their stomachs and groaning in pain. I was internally ecstatic, but I kept my face frozen in a cold stare as I looked down at the pile of men. "Get out of here before I really get started." They scrambled to their feet and practically trampled each other to get out of the alley. "Thank you," Sarah said as I turned back toward her. I'd been too busy knocking heads to really see what she looked like. Now that things had calmed down, I took a good look at the heroine. Her skin was remarkably pale, making the bloodstains on her face stand out even more clearly in the rain. Her features were as perfect as a hand-carved sculpture, and her dark eyes were piercingly bright. They looked like they held an entire galaxy inside them. That tiny beauty mark just beneath her, I gave her an aura that was both captivating and incredibly dangerous. Wow, she's young, but she's definitely a 10 out of 10. Okay, time to play the part and comfort this poor, displaced girl who has nowhere else to turn. I needed to establish my persona here. Sarah narrowed her eyes at me, her lip twitching slightly as if she could sense the ridiculous thoughts running through my head. I looked up at her and gave her a smile. "No problem at all. My name is Ethan Hawthorne. It is a pleasure to meet you." Sarah politely extended her hand and gave me a small nod. "Hello, I am Sarah Frost." It was such a shame that a girl this gorgeous was actually a total psychopath with a warped mind. She was into some seriously twisted stuff, like choking the main character and watching him cry while he begged for mercy. I definitely needed to keep my distance for my own safety. As that thought crossed my mind, Sarah's eyes flickered for a moment, and her grip on my hand tightened noticeably. "Sophia, Mia, what are you doing here? I told you I'm not going back with you, so stop following me." I jumped when I heard that familiar voice and immediately let go of Sarah's hand. Holy crap, how did Ethan end up back here? And Sophia and Mia were here too? Listen, I just remembered I have something really important to take care of. I have to go. I kept my head down and started jogging toward the mouth of the alley. I had been pretending to be Ethan in front of her, and if Sarah realized I was a fraud, the whole plot would be ruined. How was the story supposed to progress after that? I was praying to whoever was listening that they wouldn't see me, but suddenly, a hand clamped onto my arm like a vice. "Morrison!" I turned around and locked eyes with Mia, who was looking at me with that fake, innocent expression of hers. I immediately tried to pry her hand off. "You have the wrong guy. I'm not your brother." Mia only tightened her grip, her expression more serious than I had ever seen it. "I don't make mistakes like that. You're my brother. You are Morrison Vance." I started to panic and glanced back into the alley. It was completely empty, and Sarah had already vanished. I let out a quiet sigh of relief. Haha, I guess I can't hide anything from you. You've got sharp eyes, kid. I gave her a nonchalant smile and pulled off my mask. The rain had completely drenched me, and I probably looked like a drowned rat. Sophia walked over and held an umbrella over my head without saying a word. Ethan, how can you stand there and enjoy everything that was supposed to be mine? He really had the nerve to say that so confidently. Ethan suddenly appeared and slapped the umbrella right out of Sophia's hand. The freezing rain started pouring over me again, making me shiver uncontrollably. I am the only true son of the Hawthorne family, he declared. If you hadn't stolen my place, all this wealth, attention, and love would have belonged to me from the start. Now that I am back, are you really going to try and fight me for it? As he spoke, tears started streaming down his face. If he hadn't been holding an umbrella, you would have thought the tears were just part of the storm. I was honestly a loss for words. It felt like the author maxed out Sarah's beauty and intelligence stats, but when it came to Ethan, they put everything into stupidity and being a total simp. His character was so cliché it made my stomach churn. There was no way I was going to let his little sob story fool me. I didn't hold back at all. First off, I was switched at birth too, which makes me just as much of a victim as you. Second, you were the one screaming about how you never wanted to come back to this family. You were the one saying you didn't want to be some rich heir and that you just wanted to be Ethan Hawthorne. You were the one who ran away. And now, after you ran off, you come back crying because you want it all? You want the respect, the money, and the power. You really think you can have your cake and eat it too? Every word out of your mouth is just emotional blackmail and moral posturing. It is honestly disgusting. Ethan's face slowly crumpled, and he looked at Sophia with the eyes of an abandoned puppy. Sophia, he whimpered. That sickly sweet whine gave Sophia visible goosebumps. On one hand, she had me, the brother she had grown up with for nearly 20 years. On the other hand, she had her actual biological brother. It was clearly a difficult choice for her. Both of you, just stop it. We're going home. Tonight is Mason Croft's birthday party, and we already promised we would attend. Mason's birthday, that triggered a memory of a specific chapter in the book. At the party, Ethan was supposed to drink a spiked cocktail and nearly end up in bed with Sarah's aunt, Chloe Sterling. Chloe was a massive power player in the New York elite circles. Sophia's breath hitched the moment she heard Mason's name, and her expression immediately soured. I asked her if she was okay, feeling a bit concerned. She just shook her head and said it was nothing. We were already running late, so let's get moving. After that, she turned back to look at Ethan, who was trying to follow us. You aren't coming, she said flatly. Ethan looked shocked and asked why. Because you didn't grow up in this circle. You don't know the etiquette or how things work here. An event like this just isn't the right place for you. Her tone was matter of fact, but Ethan clearly took it as a personal insult, as if she were saying he wasn't good enough for their world. He shot me a venomous glare, acting like this was all my fault. I was completely innocent here. According to the original story, wasn't he supposed to become the family's precious golden boy only after I died? Things were definitely not going according to plan. Back at the Hawthorne estate, I was halfway through a hot shower when I heard someone rapping on the bathroom door. It was Sarah. Here is the suit you are wearing to the party tonight. She was holding a black suit that looked sleek and understated, but radiated wealth. This wasn't my usual style at all. Sarah raised an eyebrow and asked if I didn't like it, reaching for her phone to order another one immediately. I quickly stopped her and took the suit from her hands. No, I actually really like it. Tonight is Mason's big night, so he should be the center of attention anyway. I told her it was better if I dressed a bit more modestly for the occasion. Sarah finally put her phone away and told me she would be waiting downstairs for us to leave together. I was bent over putting on my socks when Isabella walked in and handed me a watch. Right behind her, Eva came in carrying a fresh dress shirt. This shirt will go perfectly with that suit, Eva said. Something felt incredibly off. Why were they all being so attentive today? Normally, all this royal treatment was supposed to be reserved for Ethan. In the study next door, the sisters were all looking at each other in silence. Did any of you hear something just now? Sarah asked, sitting with her arms crossed and a dead serious expression. After a long silence, Mia was the first to speak. I heard it too. It sounded exactly like Morrison's thoughts. None of them looked particularly happy. I didn't catch everything, Sophia said with a frown, but it fits with how strangely he's been acting today, especially all that talk about a plot. It all seems to line up, she continued. She went over everything that had happened that day, and the room was suddenly filled with the sound of sharp intakes of breath. And there is more, Mia added, blinking. Morrison's thoughts said that the heroine, Sarah, is going to frame me and that I will end up dying in a terrorist attack. I heard that part as well, Sarah said, her brow furrowed. He also said Ethan would be the one to kill me and leave me to die in the street. Isabella couldn't help but voice her doubts. This could all just be in his head. Maybe Morrison found out he isn't our biological brother and is just making this up to drive a wedge between us and Ethan. Eva nodded in agreement. Isabella has a point. It is not impossible. And seriously, how could the world we live in actually be a novel? If what he is thinking is true, it means we are all just fictional characters. We wouldn't even be real people. Sophia looked down, lost in thought. Staring at the cup in front of her, Sophia spoke slowly. Morrison also thought that Ethan would be drugged tonight at Mason's party and almost end up with Chloe Sterling. Chloe Sterling? From the Sterling family in D.C. She is on the other side of the country. Why on earth would she show up at Mason's birthday party? And she is supposed to almost sleep with Ethan? Isabella thought the whole thing sounded insane. Those two have nothing to do with each other. There is no way they would ever be connected. They debated the issue for a good while until Sarah finally made a decision. Fine, then Ethan is coming with us tonight. Sarah, you can't be serious. Sophia immediately protested. What if Morrison's thoughts are right and Ethan actually gets drugged? Even if we didn't grow up with him, he is still our brother. We can't just stand by and let someone take advantage of him like that. If we want to find out if Morrison is telling the truth, this is the only way to do it, Sarah said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Ethan is coming. When I arrive at the entrance of the ballroom, I spotted Ethan immediately. He was wearing a sharp white suit and looked incredibly smug. He waved me over, saying, Sarah told me I could come along after all. I didn't know how to put an outfit together, so Sophia had one of her company's top stylists handle it for me. Eva gave me the suit, and Isabella gave me this watch. He made a point of lifting his wrist to flash the luxury timepiece at me. Then his eyes drifted to my wrist, and his expression soured instantly. I was wearing the exact same watch, just in a different color. I could feel my lip twitching. One was white, and the other was black, perfectly matching the suits we were wearing. To anyone who didn't know us, we probably looked like two brothers who were incredibly close. I glanced over at the sisters standing nearby and sighed internally. For people raised in high society, they really didn't have much of a consistent sense of style, did they? But then I thought back to the gifts they had given me over the years. It was always limited edition RC cars, action figures, or massive Lego sets. Expecting them to have sophisticated taste in fashion accessories was probably asking too much. It was like a direct hit to the sisters' questionable fashion sense. The Croft family had made their fortune in real estate, and for this party, they had rented out an entire luxury ballroom in the Hamptons. Every influential person in New York had been invited. Since this was Ethan's first time at an event like this, he looked visibly uncomfortable. He clung to the sisters' sides until he spotted Mason Croft, then finally walked over with a smile. It looks like Ethan and Mason are pretty tight. Eva watched them chatting and made a casual remark. I took a sip of my champagne and thought to myself that it made perfect sense. To make extra cash, Ethan had been working as a part-time butler at the Hawthorne estate and also doing some tutoring. He was actually the tutor for Mason's 10-year-old brother, so they had a good relationship. In fact, the person who gave Mason the terrible idea to spike the drinks was Ethan himself. Thinking about that made me look at Eva with quite a bit of pity. According to the original script, that spiked drink was actually intended for her. Mason had been pursuing Eva for a long time, failing at every turn. It was only because of Ethan's encouragement that he decided to use such a scummy tactic to force a relationship. Ironically, through a twist of fate, Ethan was the one who ended up drinking it in the book. You really have to admit the plot of this story is pure melodrama. Eva looked like she was breaking out in a cold sweat just thinking about it. The other sisters couldn't hold back their laughter anymore. Isabella patted Eva on the shoulder with a massive grin and joked about how that spiked drink was originally meant for her. They all burst into even louder laughter. I looked at them, totally confused, and asked what was so funny. Sarah just shook her head, tried her best to hide her smile, as she told me it was nothing. Right then, Mason approached from across the room, carrying 2 glasses. He was wearing a sharp blue suit and had a gentle smile on his face as he handed a glass to Eva, saying it had been a while. Eva took one look at the glass and immediately recoiled, telling him she didn't drink. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing out loud. The guy was way too aggressive. He had even tried to barge into the bathroom while she was showering once, which had left her pretty traumatized. Eva was practically terrified of the guy now. If it weren't for the respect she had for his father, there was no way she would have even shown up to this party. The sisters all started giggling again for no apparent reason, while Eva's face turned as red as a tomato. Mason looked at me with a flash of surprise and asked if I was Morrison. "That's me," I replied. Honestly, Mason's own story arc was pretty tragic. He tried so hard to find love only to be rejected, and then he almost got mauled to death by wild animals, all because of his best friend, Ethan. If Eva hadn't shown up just in time, he wouldn't have made it through that night. Even though he survived, he ended up losing the use of both his legs. By the time Eva finally found the courage to confess her feelings to him, he felt so broken and worthless that he thought he wasn't good enough for her. He ended up jumping off a roof to end it all. Both Eva and Mason whipped their heads around to stare at me at the exact same time. I just stood there, completely confused, wondering if I had something written on my forehead. A waiter happened to walk by with a tray, and Mason instinctively placed his glass back onto it. "I have heard the Hawthorne heir is quite the pianist. Would we be lucky enough to hear you play tonight, Mr. Hawthorne?" "Of course," I replied, heading straight for the grand piano in the corner. As my fingers touched the keys, a beautiful melody began to fill the room. The music quickly drowned out the chatter in the ballroom. Everyone fell silent, and all eyes were suddenly fixed on me. Ethan stood in the crowd, watching me under the spotlight, and his face started to twist with anxiety. He downed his drink in one go and stormed out of the room. Sarah noticed him leave and gave Isabella a quick nod, and the two of them quietly slipped out after him. Up on the balcony overlooking the ballroom, a woman in a sleek black dress sat silently in the shadows. She was staring down at me with a cold, calculating gaze. She signaled a waiter over, took a glass of red wine from his tray, and slowly stood up. The moment the piece ended, the room erupted into thunderous applause. I heard people whispering, "Isn't that the fake Hawthorne kid? What is he even doing here?" "That's not even half of it. I saw the real heir here earlier too. Tonight is definitely going to be interesting." The last time anyone saw those two together, they were busy jumping off a yacht. Hearing the applause made me feel a little smug. All those years being forced to practice piano as the fake heir had actually paid off for once. I wondered if I would be considered a piano prodigy when I got back to the real world. Maybe I wouldn't have to go back to that dead-end job after all. I started daydreaming about a future where I would be traveling the world performing in massive concert halls. I was so distracted that I lost my footing while walking off the stage and ended up rolling my ankle. I was about to go down hard, but Mia rushed forward and caught me just in time. "Morrison, are you all right?" Mason hurried over as well, looking genuinely concerned. "That looks like a pretty bad sprain. Let's get you to a lounge, and I will find a doctor." Mia put in a lot of effort to help me up to a private room on the second floor. Honestly, having a sister who is also your biggest fan is a pretty great perk. She was so sweet and attentive that I felt completely safe leaning on her. But then Mia's face suddenly turned bright red, and she started walking a little faster. I looked at her and asked why she was blushing so hard. A sister who gets embarrassed like that is actually kind of adorable. Mia's ears turned an even deeper shade of crimson. "It is just really warm in here. I'm going to go see if the doctor has arrived yet." She turned and practically bolted out of the room, almost tripping over the rug in her haste. She shut the door behind her, leaving me all alone in the room. If the timeline was correct, Ethan should be having his fated encounter with Chloe right about now. As that thought crossed my mind, the woman who had been resting in the room with her eyes closed suddenly frowned and opened them. She fixed her gaze on the back of my head. The lights were off, and the only thing illuminating the room was the moonlight streaming through the window. Even though Chloe was Sarah's aunt, she had the most tragic ending in the entire book. Just to see if Sarah still had any feelings for him, Ethan actually agreed to marry Chloe. That move made Sarah direct all of her hatred toward her aunt. Once Sarah took control of the family, she locked Chloe in a basement and tortured her day and night, specifically making sure she stayed alive just to suffer. It was a truly barbaric ending. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on my shoulder from behind and yanked me backward. I stumbled back and landed right on the bed, looking up to find myself staring into a pair of intense, piercing eyes. Panic took over, and I instinctively grabbed the woman's shoulder, using her momentum to flip her over my head and slam her onto the floor. She landed flat on her back, and I could see tears of pain welling up in her eyes. I reached out and grabbed a dumbbell from the side table, ready to hurl it at her. Luckily, she was quick enough to roll out of the way just in time. I kept my eyes locked on her, demanding to know who she was and why she was in the room. She frowned and shot back. I should be asking you that. Did you miss the private area sign on the door? I was speechless. Mia had been the one to help me in here, and I hadn't even looked at the door. Realizing I was in the wrong, I'll lower my head. I started frantically trying to think of a way out of this. Everyone at this party was either wealthy or powerful. A woman who had her own private lounge on the second floor was definitely someone important. Technically, I was still part of the Hawthorne family, but everyone knew I was just a placeholder. If I ended up offending a big shot, there was no way the Hawthorns would step in to save me. I had to figure out a way to smooth this over on my own. My mind was racing as I blurted out. The truth is, I am just part of the cleaning staff. I just came in to see if you required any assistance, ma'am. She looked me up and down, her eyes filled with obvious skepticism. Oh, so the cleaning crew wears custom-tailored suits now? She asked dryly. Is this some new uniform? Or is your boss into some strange roleplay? She kept staring at me with that cold gaze. I lowered my voice and shot back. You might be beautiful, but that sounded a lot like sexual harassment. Should I go ahead and call the police? Her smile disappeared instantly as she tried to push herself up from the floor. But her foot caught on a throw pillow, and she slipped. She completely lost her balance and crashed right on top of me, pinning me back down onto the bed. I felt something soft brush against my cheek. She froze for a second, realizing she had accidentally kissed me. Seriously? How did I end up in the middle of a cheesy romance trope? Get off me, you weirdo. I was about to push her away, but she was already scrambling to get up. But in that brief moment of contact, she could tell something was wrong with her body. A sudden wave of heat washed over her, and her limbs started to shake. I tried to get up and leave as fast as I could, but she grabbed me and slammed me against the wall. The position we were in was incredibly compromising. I finally got a good look at her face. Her cheeks were flushed bright red, and she was breathing heavily. The way she was looking at me was definitely not normal. My eyes widened in realization. Oh man, did she end up drinking that spiked cocktail Mason had prepared? According to the plot, Ethan was supposed to be the one who accidentally drank it. Ma'am, you need to stay calm. Let's not do anything reckless here. Just then, we heard footsteps out in the hallway. Terrified of being caught, she reached out and frantically locked the door. This was bad, really bad. I have been single for over 20 years, and I was about to lose my virginity in a situation like this. I didn't care how beautiful she was. I had standards. I was panicking so hard that I completely forgot I was strong enough to just shove her off. The woman was doing everything in her power to fight off the effects of the drug, trying to suppress the fire that was burning through her veins. I don't know if it was some kind of sibling intuition or just pure luck, but right at that moment, the door was kicked off its hinges. The entire door frame shook from the impact. I just stared in awe. Mia's destructive power was basically on par with a small explosion. She rushed over to me and grabbed my shoulders, looking me up and down. Morrison, are you okay? Who was the one bothering you? I instinctively pointed toward where she had been, but the room was empty. That woman had vanished into thin air. Mia and I both sprinted to the open window and looked down, just catching a glimpse of a black Maybach speeding off into the night like an arrow. Mia whipped out her phone, snapped a photo of the license plate, and sent it to a contact to track down the owner. She stared after the car as it faded into the darkness, a dangerous glint in her eyes. On the other side of town, the driver was keeping a close eye on the woman in the back seat through the rearview mirror. "Ms. Sterling, are you feeling all right?" Chloe leaned her forehead against the cool glass of the window. "I am fine. Just leave me alone. Just get me back to the hotel." If she hadn't made such a quick escape, she definitely would have been caught red-handed. She stumbled into her hotel suite and went straight to the bathroom, cranking the shower to full cold. She let the freezing water pour over her from head to toe, using the shock to try and drown out the lingering heat in her body. Once she felt a little more lucid, she dried her hands and dialed a number on her phone. The woman on the other end answered with a lazy, teasing tone. "Well, if it isn't Ms. Sterling, aren't you supposed to be finding your soulmate in the Hamptons? What do you want with me?" Chloe shut off the shower, her gaze turning icy. "Cut the crap. I need you to run a background check on someone." The person on the other end sounded even more excited now. "No way. Did you actually find the guy?" "Don't get ahead of yourself," Chloe interrupted coldly. "Just do it. I want everything on Morrison Vance of the Hawthorne family. Have a complete file in my inbox within 30 minutes. The doctor started applying ointment to my badly swollen ankle, and the pain made my face contort. "Mr. Hawthorne, make sure you keep this iced when you get home. Try to stay off your feet for the next few days, or it will only get worse." As soon as he finished speaking, Mia rolled a wheelchair into the room. "Don't worry, Morrison. From now on, I'll be the one to get you wherever you need to go." I looked at her deadpan expression, and my lips started to twitch. "Mia, it is just a sprained ankle. I am not a cripple. I really don't need a wheelchair." But Mia wasn't having it. "No argument. You're going to sit there and stay off that foot until it is completely healed." I let out a helpless sigh, knowing there was no point in arguing with her. My sister was great, but she could be incredibly stubborn when she set her mind to something. Once she made up her mind, there was no changing it. She was so good to me that for a split second, I actually didn't want to leave this world. Mia's eyes flickered for a moment. "Then don't leave," she said softly. That caught me completely off guard and left me speechless. I just stared at her for a long time. "Never mind," she said, breaking the silence. "The ball is about to start. Let's get you downstairs." Mia lowered her head and began pushing my wheelchair toward the elevator. Along the way, all the high society guests we passed gave me looks of pure pity. They clearly thought I was some poor, permanently disabled heir. Being stared at like that made me feel extremely self-conscious. I looked up at Mia and asked where everyone else was. Sarah and Isabella had some business to take care of, and Sophia is stuck in a meeting with the Lockwood Group. As for Eva, she drifted off, looking toward the center of the dance floor. I followed her gaze and saw a gorgeous couple dancing in the middle of the floor. The man had a smile as warm as a spring breeze, but the woman clearly didn't want to be there. It was Eva and Mason. I watched them with interest. You shouldn't be fooled by Eva's annoyed expression, because according to the story, she is eventually going to lose her mind for this guy. A sudden crash snapped me out of my thoughts. I looked toward the sound and saw a slender woman being kicked across the floor by my sister Isabella. She landed right in the middle of the dance floor. Eva instinctively stepped forward, putting herself between the woman and Mason. Mason froze for a moment, his gaze lingering on Eva's profile, a hint of a smile touching his eyes. "You actually hit me?" the woman shrieked as she scrambled to her feet. "Do you have any idea who my mother is? She is the CEO of the Lockwood Group. I am her daughter. If you so much as lay a finger on me again, I will make sure she ruins your entire life. You won't be able to get a job in this city, and I'll have you thrown in prison for the rest of your life." Isabella cracked her neck and sneered. "Ruin my life? I would love to see how the Lockwood family plans on doing that." As soon as she finished speaking, a hand came swinging down and slapped the woman across the face. "You classless brat. Are you trying to start a war between our families?" Mr. Lockwood's face was beet red, his eyes bloodshot with rage as he glared at his spoiled, loud-mouthed youngest daughter. The moment she saw her father, The young woman forgot all about the stinging pain on her cheek and started pointing at Isabella, screaming for him to do something because she had been hit. Nobody but you has ever dared to lay a hand on me. I want her reputation destroyed. Mr. Lockwood glanced at Isabella coldly before turning back and slapping his daughter again. Have you completely lost your mind, or are you just drunk? Open your eyes and look at who you are screaming at. That is Isabella Hawthorne, the third daughter of the Hawthorne family. If she wants to hit you, you sit there and take it. Do you have anything else to say? He shoved his daughter aside and hurried over to Isabella. He forced a fawning smile onto his face and said, Ms. Hawthorne, please forgive her. My wife has spoiled her rotten, and she thinks the rules don't apply to her. I want to offer my sincerest apologies for her behavior. You think a simple apology is going to fix this? A calm, cold female voice cut in. Sarah emerged from the crowd, supporting a very weak Ethan who was leaning almost his entire weight on her shoulder. Mr. Lockwood, would you like to hear exactly how your daughter decided to introduce herself to my brother? Lockwood turned his furious gaze toward his daughter, who was still sitting on the floor. What exactly did you do? The girl looked both hurt and confused, stammering that she just wanted to be friends with the guy. You call that being friends? Isabella let out a cold laugh. You were practically pawing at him. Since when is that how you make friends? You actually threw yourself at him and said, Hey, handsome, why won't you look at me? Are you intimidated because I'm so beautiful? Her imitation was spot on, right down to the tone and the gestures. The atmosphere was supposed to be tense, but I almost burst out laughing. She really was an Oscar-winning actress, able to slip into a performance effortlessly at a moment's notice. Isabella's lip twitched slightly at my internal commentary, but she quickly refocused her fierce gaze on the woman sitting on the floor. If I hadn't shown up when I did, God only knows what else you were planning to do to my brother. Is what Ms. Hawthorne said true? Mr. Lockwood's face darkened as he gave his daughter a sharp nudge with his foot. I just thought he was hot and wanted to flirt a little. Is that a crime now? Flirting isn't illegal, Isabella said coldly. But you were harassing my brother. And when you mess with my brother, you are messing with me. The crowd around them began to whisper, realizing that Ethan was the true Hawthorne heir. The Lockwoods really stepped in at this time. Don't you know how much power the Hawthornes have in this city? Each one of those sisters is a powerhouse with connections everywhere. The Lockwood family is basically finished in this town. Sophia stepped forward and added, Mr. Lockwood, I think it is best if we terminate our current business agreements immediately. That partnership was something Mr. Lockwood had spent months begging Sophia for. His face turned as white as a sheet instantly. He grabbed his daughter and forced her into a low bow. Miss Hawthorne, we were blind and foolish. Please have mercy on us. Hearing the apology, Ethan finally peeked out from behind Sarah. Sarah, they already apologized. Maybe we should just let it go. It looks like they're going through enough as it is. I couldn't take it anymore. I lowered my head and bit my lip as hard as I could keep from laughing, but my shoulders were shaking uncontrollably. This was just too much. The author must have been feeling sadistic when they gave the main character this kind-hearted saint personality. It was absolutely ridiculous. I was laughing so hard I was practically in tears, and I was still grinning when I looked up. Then I realized that all the sisters and Mason were staring right at me. Wait a minute. Why were they looking at me like that? Had I accidentally laughed out loud? Right then, Sophia took a step forward. Nobody messes with a Hawthorne and walks away scot-free. As soon as the words left her mouth, Mason's father, Mr. Croft, gave a subtle signal to his security team. The security guards understood perfectly and stepped forward, firmly escorting the Lockwood family out of the building. It is all over. Everything, Mr. Lockwood wailed as he was led away. Everything I worked my life to build has been destroyed by you. You useless girl. What a waste of all those years. I'm incredibly sorry about that, Mr. Croft said, approaching Ethan with a glass of wine. It was poor judgment on my part to invite such people. It is entirely my fault that the Hawthorne heir had such an unpleasant experience at my son's party. Ethan looked up at him, and Mr. Croft froze for a second. He suddenly realized that the young man standing next to Sarah wasn't me, but Ethan. He looked a bit flustered his eyes darting around. Ethan just turned his head away, his body language cold and distant. It was obvious there was more to their history than met the eye. "Mr. Croft, do you already know my brother?" Sarah asked casually. Mr. Croft quickly explained that Mr. Hawthorne used to tutor his younger son. "Oh, I see," Sarah said with a nod. "We only recently reunited with him. He has been through a lot of hardships over the years." Hearing her say that made the sisters feel another wave of guilt. Watching this touching family moment actually made me feel a little emotional too. Even though I hadn't died and exited the stage as planned, Ethan was definitely starting to find his place in their hearts. The fact that the sisters were feeling pity and guilt meant that their sibling bond was finally starting to mend itself. The plot seemed to be drifting back toward the original script, which meant I was probably getting closer to finally going home. Ethan was still visibly shaken and clearly wasn't in the mood to stay at the party any longer. Sarah exchanged a few more pleasantries with Mr. Croft and then prepared to take Ethan back home. "By the way, Mr. Croft," she added, "my sister's career makes her something of a public figure, so I would appreciate it if you could keep tonight's events quiet." Mr. Croft nodded understandingly. "Of course, I understand the need for privacy when it comes to public figures." As they walked past Mason, Ethan felt his gaze and apologized for ruining his birthday celebration. Mason gave him a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's no big deal. It was just a little party anyway. Besides, you've already helped me out quite a bit, haven't you?" He emphasized the word "helped" so heavily that while others might have missed it, Eva definitely noticed and frowned. "Morrison, let's head out," Mia said from behind me, beginning to push my wheelchair toward the exit. When we got back to the Hawthorne estate, the lights in the living room were still shining brightly. As soon as we stepped through the door, we heard Mrs. Hawthorne's voice calling out, "Oh, Ethan's sweetheart. Your father and I were only away on a business trip for a few days. Why on earth did you run away from home? Do you not like it here, or do we do something to upset you? You can tell me anything, and I promise I will make it right." Mrs. Hawthorne pulled Ethan into a tight embrace, holding him close. Ethan's entire body went stiff, clearly not used to that level of physical affection. "Mom, you're going to scare him away," Sarah said, stepping in to ease the tension. "I am just so overwhelmed," Mrs. Hawthorne replied with watery eyes. "I'm just so happy we finally found you. Anyway, I heard you all went to Mason Croft's birthday party. Why are you back so soon?" Isabella, still fuming, recounted every single detail of what had happened that evening. Hearing that her biological son had almost been taken advantage of made Mrs. Hawthorne panic, and she immediately started checking Ethan for any injuries. Once she was sure he was okay, she let out a sigh of relief before her expression hardened. "I know that Lockwood girl. She is nothing but a talentless troublemaker." "Sophia, didn't you just start a new project with the Lockwood Group?" Sophia quickly clarified, "It was just one agreement. As of today, we are cutting all ties with them." "Good," Mrs. Hawthorne said decisively. "A company run by people like that doesn't deserve to succeed. I'll make a few calls. The Lockwood family's time in New York is officially over. All right, enough talk at the front door. Come inside, everyone. I spent the afternoon cooking a massive meal for all of you." Mrs. Hawthorne smiled and pulled Ethan toward the dining room. I just sat there in my wheelchair by the entrance, watching the perfect family scene unfold in front of me. It still stung a little bit. After all, I had been their brother for 10 years, and now I was watching them shift all of their love and attention to someone else. I used to be such a brat, using my status as a Hawthorne to cause all kinds of drama. But the sisters had always indulged me and let things slide. But now they had a real brother who was actually kind and well-behaved. So of course they were going to spoil him even more. Mrs. Hawthorne had given up on me a long time ago and had always been incredibly strict with me. But with Ethan, she was all smiles and gentle words. Honestly, I'm a grown man sitting right here in a wheelchair. Do they think I'm invisible or something? My presence in this house was basically non-existent. I was grumbling to myself as the four sisters headed toward the dining room. Suddenly, they all stopped in their tracks. They turned around to look at me simultaneously, their expressions a confusing mix of different emotions. Sarah was the first to speak. "Mia, bring him into the dining room so he can eat with us." The moment she said that, Mia happily started wheeling me toward the table. Morrison, you are part of the family, so come and eat. You are way too thin, Mrs. Hawthorne called out from the head of the table. Before long, Ethan's plate was piled high with food. Mom, I can't possibly eat all of this, he said. He said it, but I caught him shooting me a smug, provocative look. I just ignored him and rolled my eyes, focusing on the food on my own plate. I had no intention of playing his games. Mom, I can't help but feel like Morrison hasn't been very happy since I arrived, Ethan said. It was like Ethan couldn't stand the silence and felt the need to drag me into the conversation. I was perfectly happy being ignored, but he just had to put the spotlight on me. The Hawthorns finally shifted their gaze over to me. For a split second, they both looked genuinely surprised to see me there. It was like they had only just realized I was sitting at the table. Oh, I didn't even notice you were there, Morrison, Mrs. Hawthorne said casually. That was when she finally noticed the wheelchair, and a flash of concern crossed her face. Morrison, what happened to your leg? Why are you in a wheelchair? In the original story, I was supposed to be long dead by now. Being here made me feel like an uninvited guest at a party that had already ended. It wasn't surprising that they kept forgetting I existed. I looked down and said with a touch of sarcasm, "It is nothing. I just sprained my ankle. I will be fine in a few days." Mrs. Hawthorne just gave a distracted nod and told me to rest up. After that, everyone's attention immediately went right back to Ethan. I was back to being invisible. I just focused on my dinner until Sophia, who was sitting across from me, suddenly dropped a large piece of braised pork onto my plate. Stop just eating vegetables. Eat this. The protein will help your ankle heal faster. I was actually a little touched that the usually cold Sophia was looking out for me. But then she gave that ridiculous reason, and I was just speechless. Sophia's lip twitched again, and the other sisters started giggling after hearing my internal monologue. What is so funny? Ethan asked, looking confused. Sarah struggled to hide her smile as she waved him off, telling everyone to just focus on their dinner. Meanwhile, over at the Sterling Hotel, I have the information you requested. Morrison Vance, the officially registered son of the Hawthorne family in New York. However, apparently they just discovered a few days ago that he isn't their biological child. Their actual son is a young man named Ethan Hawthorne. I have already sent the full file to your inbox. Chloe's eyes drifted to the photo of me included in the documents. Her gaze slid down to the education section of my resume. Morrison Vance, New York University, major in horology and emblematic design. Ethan's room was right next to mine. In the original version of the story, my bedroom was supposed to become his as soon as I died. But since I was still very much alive, he had to settle for the guest room next door for the time being. Even so, Mrs. Hawthorne had decorated that guest room to be absolutely palatial. I was hopping past his door on one foot when he happened to step out. He leaned against the doorframe, tilting his chin up as he glared at me with pure arrogance. Morrison, if I were in your shoes, I would be far too ashamed to keep living in this house. You could practically smell the condescension on him from across the hall. I just gave him a smile and acted like I had no idea what he was talking about. The Hawthorne family is incredibly wealthy and influential, and they give me $100,000 in allowance every month. Plus, my room is twice the size of yours. On paper, my last name is still Hawthorne. That makes me one of the legal heirs, so why on earth would I ever want to move out? Ethan's face turned a shade of purple from rage. How can you be so incredibly shameless? I am sorry, I said with a grin, but I have always been this shameless. He was so angry he couldn't even form a coherent sentence. I was in a great mood as I hopped past him and back in my own room. Ethan let out a loud snort and slammed his door shut. A moment later, the sisters emerged from the shadows of the hallway, staring at the two closed doors side by side. Honestly, other than being a little spoiled, Morrison isn't actually a bad person, Eva said, her voice tinged with a bit of sympathy. Do you think we've been being a little too cold to Morrison just because Ethan is back? Let's not forget how Morrison used to treat Ethan before all of this, Isabella countered immediately. Sophia nodded in agreement. Ethan is our actual biological brother. He has suffered so much out there, so It is only right that we make it up to him. Morrison has lived a life of luxury in this house for years, and he knows we have always treated him well. We don't owe him anything. But Morrison actually cares about us, Mia blurted out, clearly not wanting to see me get hurt. And don't forget, according to those thoughts we heard, Ethan is the one who eventually destroys this family and gets us all killed. Sarah and I followed Ethan the entire way and never saw any sign of Chloe Sterling. Instead, that Lockwood girl almost took advantage of him. That just proves that Morrison's thoughts can't be trusted, Isabella stated calmly. She paused for a moment before adding with a faint smile, though, having two brothers might not be the worst thing in the world. I had been out in the rain for way too long and was already starting to feel sick. I took a quick shower and crashed onto my bed, falling into a deep sleep instantly. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like every bone in my body was breaking. I wanted to sit up and take my temperature, but I didn't even have the strength to move. I just lay there frozen and miserable for the rest of the night. My head was throbbing, and it wasn't until the morning light started peeking through the curtains that I finally managed to crawl out of bed and find a thermometer. 101 degrees, a high fever. It was definitely from being out in the rain the night before. I got dressed and limped my way downstairs. The butler was the only one in the living room. "Good morning, sir. Would you like some breakfast?" Even though everyone knew I wasn't a biological Hawthorne, as long as I lived here, the staff still had to maintain a certain level of professional courtesy. "No thanks. Where is everyone?" I asked as casually as possible. The butler cleared her throat and gave me a pointed look. "The master and mistress have taken Master Ethan to officially update his birth certificate and legal records." I froze for a second while putting on my shoes. They certainly weren't wasting any time. The butler seemed a little surprised by how unfazed I appear to be. In the past, I would have thrown a massive tantrum if things didn't go my way. But now that the truth about the switch was out, I knew I didn't have the right to act like a spoiled brat anymore. People who work in mansions like this are experts at reading the room. She had clearly already labeled me as old news, so she didn't even bother asking where I was going as I walked out the front door. I took a cab to Mount Sinai Hospital. After the doctor checked me out, he wrote me a few prescriptions and hooked me up 2 and 4. The fever had me feeling so out of it that I barely even felt the needle go into the back of my hand. I leaned against the wall and started to drift off to sleep. Suddenly, I heard someone nearby let out a soft cry of pain. The voice sounded incredibly familiar. I opened my eyes and noticed that the door to the room across from me was slightly ajar. Through the gap in the door, I caught a glimpse of Chloe Sterling. Her face was beautiful, but she looked deeply troubled. She was frowning and looked completely restless. My eyes widened. Oh man, it was that crazy woman again. I wondered if my internal insults were too loud, because for a second, it felt like she heard me. She glanced toward the door before quickly looking back down. There was no way she could see me from that angle. At least I hoped not. The nurse who had just finished giving her an injection walked out, muttering to herself as she packed up her tray. I don't know what her problem is, getting that worked up over a tiny needle. That kid across the hall didn't even flinch. I kept my head down, terrified that I might accidentally make eye contact with her. That would have been beyond awkward. Suddenly, a pair of perfectly polished and obviously very expensive high heels came to a stop right in front of my feet. "Mr. Housekeeper," Chloe's voice said from above me, laced with a hint of amusement. "It looks like we meet again." I knew she had recognized me immediately. I forced a stiff smile and said, "What a coincidence, ma'am. Are you feeling under the weather as well?" She obviously wasn't sick. She was clearly just worried about any lingering effects from that spiked drink. Otherwise, why would someone who was terrified of needles volunteer to get a shot? But honestly, running into her here of all places was a pretty wild coincidence. "I suppose so," she said, taking a seat right next to me. She tilted her head and looked at me with a playful glint in her eyes. "After the way you handled me last night, I think I qualify as a severely injured patient." I didn't dare say a word in response. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife until the silence was finally broken by someone calling out a name. "Chloe Sterling, your prescription is ready. Make sure you take it exactly as directed." Hearing that name made me freeze. Everything suddenly clicked into place in my head. I whipped my head around to stare at the woman sitting next to me. She was Chloe Sterling? So the woman from last night was actually her? But according to the book, Ethan was supposed to be the one with her at that moment. How did the plot get derailed again? The whole thing was becoming a complete disaster. I called for the system to show itself immediately. I asked what the hell it was doing. I managed to stay calm on the outside, but internally I was starting to lose it. The system finally decided to respond to my call. Morrison, the very fact that you are still alive has caused the narrative to drift significantly from its intended course. That is why I've been telling you that you need to do everything in your power to push the main character's arc forward and get the story back on track. We are running out of time, and the stakes are high. I am counting on you, Morrison. After giving me those vague instructions, the system went silent and started ignoring me again. No matter how much I yelled in my head, all I got back was silence. I muttered a curse under my breath, only to look up and realize Chloe was staring right at me. I quickly clarified that I wasn't cursing at her. In this universe, Chloe was just as unhinged as the heroine, Sarah. She had done some truly terrible things to make sure she kept total control over the Sterling family empire. That included orchestrating the accident that left her own sister paralyzed and bedridden for life. She had taken over the family business in her early 20s and was so ruthless that nobody dared to cross her. If I actually ended up on her bad side, I would probably be the subject of a breaking news story by tomorrow morning. The way she was looking at me, a mix of strange curiosity and a hint of something else, made a cold shiver run down my spine. "Why do you keep staring at me?" I asked. "Oh, it is nothing. I just think you are remarkably handsome," she said in a slow, deliberate tone. It was obvious that my visible nervousness was amusing her. A faint, knowing smile played on her lips. Did she just call me handsome? Please don't tell me this is some kind of instant attraction or love at first sight. I moved a few steps away as if I had just uncovered some dark, terrible secret. The smile on Chloe's face faltered for a moment. We sat there in absolute silence for what felt like an eternity. It wasn't until the very last drop of medicine drained from the forebag that the silence was finally broken. The second the nurse pulled the needle out, I bolted upright, wanting nothing more than to escape that bizarre situation. Chloe stood up as well and started following right behind me. "Murder! The doctor killed her!" Someone started screaming from down the hall. A large crowd gathered around the commotion almost instantly. I tried to steer clear of the crowd, but then I caught a glimpse of the person at the center of it all. It was my sister, Sarah. A man was gripping her arm tightly, his eyes bloodshot as he screamed at her. "This is the doctor who murdered my wife. It was her. I want her to pay for what she did." "Sir, you need to calm down right now," someone else said. Another doctor tried to pry his hand off. "We have an emergency surgery to get to. If you have a complaint, you could talk to Dr. Hawthorne when she is finished." That only seemed to make the man even more furious. "I don't care. I want an explanation right this second. I traveled all the way to New York just so she could have this surgery, and she died right there on your operating table. How am I supposed to go on without her? You are a murderer." He glared at Sarah with pure hatred. He raised his fist to strike her. With Sarah's reflexes, she could have easily dodged the blow. But she just stood there and took the hit. Blood started to trickle from the corner of her mouth, but she didn't say a word. Seeing that made me desperately search my memory for the plot of the book. After a moment, it finally came back to me. The man's wife had been suffering from severe heart failure, and their local hospital didn't have the equipment or the expertise to treat her. They had no choice but to bring her to New York, and they had specifically requested Sarah to be the lead surgeon. But during the procedure, the patient suffered a sudden brain hemorrhage. Even though the entire surgical team worked through the night to save her, they couldn't bring her back. Sarah had been carrying that guilt for a long time. According to the story, Ethan was supposed to show up in about a minute. He was meant to take a knife for Sarah, which would cause their sibling bond to strengthen instantly. Sarah's ears twitched slightly, and she glanced over in my direction. Her gaze landed on me, standing right at the edge of the crowd. She pressed her lips together, her expression unreadable. This is a hospital, and my sister is a doctor who saves lives. There is no way she is a murderer. I heard his voice before I even saw him. Ethan pushed his way through the crowd and stood in front of Sarah to protect her. He was at least half a head shorter than the man, but he tilted his chin up and stared him down with a look of pure, righteous defiance. Sarah looked visibly surprised when she saw Ethan. She must have remembered my earlier thought about him taking a knife for her. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "Sarah, I know you didn't murder anyone," he said firmly. "There has to be some kind of misunderstanding. Don't be afraid. I've already called the police. I won't let him lay another hand on you." I squinted and craned my neck, trying to catch the main character's big, heroic moment. But the crowd was so thick, I could barely see anything. I was trying to stand on my tiptoes with a sprained ankle, and I probably looked absolutely ridiculous. Chloe saw me and couldn't help but let out a little giggle. "You murder my wife. I want your life in return," the man bellowed. He pulled a small knife out of his pocket and lunged at Sarah. That knife was actually something he had brought along to kill himself with. But the moment he heard Ethan mention the police, he completely snapped and turned the weapon on Sarah instead. He gritted his teeth and decided that if he was going down, he was going to take Sarah with him. The commotion in the crowd was getting louder and louder. I ignored Chloe standing next to me and kept my eyes glued on what was happening. My heart was in my throat. Sarah had already anticipated that he might pull a weapon, and her first instinct was to shove Ethan out of the way. "Ethan, look out!" she screamed, shoving him nearly 10 feet away. But Ethan lunged back in at the very last second, throwing himself in front of Sarah. He used his body as a shield. The blade buried itself deep into the right side of his abdomen. His pristine white suit was stained bright red instantly, looking like someone had splashed a bucket of crimson paint on it. The Hawthorne parents arrived just in time to witness the whole thing. "Ethan!" Mrs. Hawthorne shrieked. She shoved the dazed man aside and rushed to her son's side. Seeing the blood pouring from his wound, she looked like she was about to have a total breakdown. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." The man stammered, his face ashen as he clutched the bloody knife. He was in total shock, his mind a complete blank as he tried to process what had just occurred. Watching from a distance, I couldn't help but marvel at how insane the main character's plot armor was. If that knife had been just 1 centimeter off, his kidney would have been punctured. Sarah, who had been pale with fear, seemed to relax slightly after hearing my mental assessment of the injury. The police arrived shortly after and took the attacker into custody. Ethan was immediately rushed into the operating room. Outside the operating room, Mrs. Hawthorne was sobbing uncontrollably in her husband's arms. "We only just got him back, and now this happens. It is all my fault. I was the one who insisted on bringing him here for a checkup." Mr. Hawthorne was frowning deeply, his face etched with worry as he gently rubbed his wife's back and whispered comforting words. "He's going to be all right, sweetheart. Ethan is strong. He will pull through this." Sarah leaned against the wall, listening to her parents and staring down at the dried blood on her hands. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She had known the attack was coming and thought she was prepared for it, but he had still rushed back and put his life on the line for her. "Dad, Mom, Sarah, how is he doing?" Sophia came running down the hall, her perfectly styled hair now a bit disheveled. She had been in a business meeting nearby, but the second she heard what happened to Ethan, she dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. "He is still in surgery," Sarah said, shaking her head. I had just finished picking up my prescription and was heading toward the exit when I realized Chloe was still following me. Why was she still here? I glanced back at her, completely baffled. She was just trailing a few paces behind me, without saying a single word. The bus pulled up and I limped on board, paid my fare, and found an empty seat. I had some savings put away, but since I wasn't the Hawthorne heir anymore, I had to start watching my spending. I still had university tuition to worry about. I just sat down when I saw Chloe hop onto the bus behind me. She was digging through her bag, but she couldn't find her phone or any cash, only a credit card. "Hey lady, can you hurry it up? I'm trying to get on here," an elderly woman behind her shouted impatiently. Chloe looked up and her eyes landed right on me. I immediately turned my head away and stared out the window, pretending I didn't see her. "You can't see me. You can't see me. Morrison, I don't have my phone or any cash on me. Chloe said from right behind me. I was completely speechless. How did she even know my name? This woman had actually gone and done a background check on me. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with someone like her. As I tried to ignore her, she heard the words "crazy woman" in my head, and her ears actually turned a little red. The people in line were getting louder, and she was just about to give up and get off the bus. But then, the old woman behind her decided to intervene. Listen, kid, if you're having a fight with your girlfriend, do it at home. Don't hold up the rest of us. Just pay her fare and let's go. Fine, I will just consider this my good deed for the day, I muttered as I paid her fare. But as soon as the money was in, the old lady lunged forward and snatched my seat. Sorry about that, young man, but these old legs aren't what they used to be, she said with a smirk. There were no other empty seats on the bus, and my ankle was starting to throb. That was my boyfriend's seat. Do you have no shame at all? Before I could even open my mouth, Chloe had already fired back. The old woman's face turned beet red. I sat down first, so it is my seat. You are incredibly rude. What did I do to deserve this? Why am I watching a high-powered CEO have a public argument with an old lady over a bus seat? The old lady finally gave up and grumbled as she moved away. I sat down immediately and whispered a quick thank you to Chloe. Chloe's lips curled into a tiny smile after hearing my thought. Don't mention it. Consider us even for the bus fare. The bus took a sharp turn, and I lost my balance, my head landing right against Chloe's chest. It was incredibly soft. The injection was working, and my fever had gone down, but I still felt lightheaded. Before long, I had fallen fast asleep against the window. When I finally woke up, Chloe was nowhere to be seen. I made my way back to the Hawthorne estate, where I found only Mia waiting for me. Morrison, you are part of this family. You need to stay on Ethan's good side, otherwise your death is only going to come sooner. Watching the family together like this actually touched me a little. The story was finally getting back on track, and it looked like I would be going home soon. Even so, Mrs. Hawthorne had turned that guest room into a palace. I was in a great mood as I limped past Ethan and back to my room. Ethan really does care about us, Mia insisted, clearly not wanting me to get hurt. After the apology, Ethan finally poked his head out from behind Sarah and suggested they just let the whole thing go. It still hurt a bit, honestly. I had been their brother for a decade, and now I was watching them give all that love to someone else. I failed to die and exit the story, but Ethan was definitely becoming more important to the sisters now. Nobody messes with a Hawthorne and gets away with it. The story was finally aligning with the original script again. That manuscript, soaked with everyone's tears, actually had a blank final page all along, just waiting for you to write the ending.